All right, all right. Look at this. I would be remiss if I didn't start out the same way that I usually do, Steve. You are here. You're looking handsome as ever. Howie, never cease to disappoint. And, it's funny because now having shaved my head again, like I used to have it, we're kind of like the trio of the bald men. So, anyways, good to see you guys. Everyone that's here today, welcome. My name is Brendan King. I'm the CEO and founder of Crisis Consultant Group. I'm telling you what, we've got an awesome webinar today. We're going to talk about culture change. And if you didn't see that already in your email and you're just showing up because you love coming to these webinars every week, we are grateful for you. We appreciate it. And for everyone that's here, understand there's a couple things. There's a chat window where you can ask questions. We've got Tracy here, I believe, monitoring the chat as best she can while handling a million things at CCG headquarters. So feel free to chime in. She'll have some questions there. And if you have something in particular you want to ask, you can do it there. Also, there is a free replay of this webinar, and it comes to your email once this is over. So don't have any fear about if you've got a bail or you've got other people that you think could have benefited from this, please forward them that email. It usually takes about a half hour or so for the system to kind of generate that video, but it is available online to anybody who's interested. So with that, as mentioned, I'm Brendan King, CEO and founder of CCG. I started this company 16 years ago, really out of a desire to just help individuals in crisis because I had been trained in other de-escalation training programs and physical intervention that was really terrible. And it just didn't work for the environment we were in. We were going hands-on almost every day. A lot of staff got hurt. A lot of kids got hurt, and adults when we had adults in our system in a psychiatric locked facility. And I just always thought to myself during those years I was there that I could come up with a better program. So just spare you all the background because you can see that on our website. We've been doing this 16 years. I have a very small hand select group of very talented, amazing instructors. Steve Naglosky is here with you today, and Howie Scott as well, who are regulars for this webinar. And they are really the leads of my instructors. Steve heads up the Calm Every Storm side of the training division, which is the de-escalation and more verbal and physical restraint. And Howie takes lead on the active threat response side, which is where we get into the higher level tactical pieces of how to respond in situations where there's workplace violence. So with that, we're going to dive right into this. This is a big topic that I think is really critical. And I'm going to kind of read through and cover a couple pieces, and then I'm going to open it up to Steve and Howie. And of course, if you have comments that you want to make, feel free to do so. And as things go, we'll try to incorporate that in. So sound good to you guys?
Yep, good to go.
Awesome. All right. So today, the topic here, and I've got some notes, so if my eyes go up like this on screen, I don't have this all up here, but I just know that I'm still looking at you. I'm just looking on the big screen. So culture change, when, sometimes it's very common when people hear the term culture change and when we start thinking about changing the workplace environment. I've worked in organizations where you show up and you know right away that there are certain activities or behaviors or even processes that are in place that are not helpful and serving the customer base or who it is that you're working with. They're not serving them effectively. And it can be, again, based on processes and systems or simply the way that individuals are interacting with each other, whether that's administration to middle management to front line, and just the breakdowns there that occur. So today I'm really going to focus on the kind of people side of the house. I'm not a program, what do they call it? Six Sigma organizational development expert. That's not my role, but I do understand crisis, as does my team. And we do have a lot of experience working in organizations from different levels, from all of us. I know working from the very front lines, spending a ton of our careers in that front line, front facing, working with the consumers, whatever they were, whether it was law enforcement, group homes, treatment centers, hospitals, to then middle management, to then also being in higher levels where we were responsible as supervisors or program directors, or even like Howie, academy instructor, like leading hundreds of thousands of people through training. And so realizing and seeing just how critical of a difference, or how big of a difference you can make and how critical what you do to change culture or mold culture into a picture that you want, and how important that is. So I've got some information here, and it says, that leadership really kind of is at the front facing piece of this. But in order to create real change and culture change, there's been arguments where people say, well, it starts from the bottom, right? And then everybody else, well, no, it starts from the top, and well, it's in between. I'm not really here to argue where it starts, but I know that there are things that I need to do, regardless of what level I'm at in an organization, that I have to do when it comes to leadership. And it begins with these 4 phases of leadership, which is the first one. You've got to know how to lead yourself. And leading yourself has to do with the discipline and responsibility that you have a level of discipline within yourself, which we're going to dig into, and a responsibility to recognize that, hey, if I'm not leading myself, not only do I not have much business leading somebody else, but there's a responsibility that comes from being that leader and being in that role. Next is leading upward. And so considering if we are going to lead individuals in an upward fashion, and guys, give me a thumbs up, thumbs down. Looks like my video is acting crazy. Okay. Good? Okay, cool. So leading up is something we have to also think about, is that regardless of where I am in an organization, whether I'm running it, and this is what's funny, even if I'm running an organization like CCG, I have a responsibility, and the key words here are excellence and respect. I have a responsibility to my team that I go upwards still for leadership for myself. Just because I'm a CEO doesn't mean I stop learning. It doesn't mean I stop being open to feedback, which we'll talk about and we'll get into. But so we have to consider that as leading up. Then also leading across. And leading across is in service and perspective of how we look at leadership within ourselves, but across, meaning the people I work with and my coworkers, because I have a responsibility there as well. Then lastly is leading down. So whether you're here on this call and you are a leader in a middle management or higher level, or even on the front lines, there's always a way to still consider, how am I leading down, and looking at that. And that involves vision, integrity, and planning, which we're going to get into as we cover these 4 steps. So this is what we call the leadership sequence. So if you're taking notes, which would be awesome, number 1 is leading yourself. Number 2 is leading up and learning how to do that. Third, leading across, and then leading down. And there's different phases that are all equally important. So in considering culture change, you're like, Brendan, that's great, but what does this have to do with culture change, or better yet, de-escalation or crisis? Well, again, if we consider that crisis situations occur often when there's a failure in leadership, where there's a failure of consistency or integrity to a mission. Let's say Howie and I, when we were working in law enforcement, and if we happened to work, we were never working in the same department, but if we did, and we showed up to a crisis, and Howie is in a position, let's say he's the sergeant and I'm a corporal or a master deputy, and I need to follow his lead. Well, he's got to be leading from the front, right? Because if he's the sergeant, technically people might see the rank on his shoulder or his collar, and they're going to assume he's the boss, and therefore he has to be setting the tone for what's going to happen. Well, if there's a difference of opinion in how this situation, this crisis should be handled, that could create huge problems from how we, to how we resolve this situation. So part of recognizing that we have a responsibility within the organization to have clear culture, and one that has a vision that we all believe in and can get behind, we're going to do a better job out there on the streets. So kind of just a simple explanation of how this ties in. But so let's start with leading yourself. First and foremost, in order to lead myself, there's a number of things that I need to be aware of. And the first one we have here is remain sensitive to the needs of others. So one of the things as a leader that I have to do is be open to the fact that not everybody's going to see things the way I do. Just like in a crisis situation, if I go to intervene in a crisis, not only is the consumer, the person, the patient, the person I'm dealing with maybe not going to see it the way I am, but I have to be sensitive to the needs that they have. And so when I consider culture change, my coworkers, I need to be sensitive to the needs that they have. As well as number 2, demonstrate self-discipline. Very important. I have to lead from the front. In running this company, my team looks up to me. I have to make sure that I'm doing and behaving and acting in a way that sets the precedent versus that I'm not going to do the things I'm going to ask my team to do. Well, that doesn't go far. And I know we've had experience. I'm going to open this up to the guys here in a second. But we've all worked in organizations where there were people that got to positions of leadership or were in positions of leadership that did not do, nor would they potentially do the things that they asked us to do. And that doesn't work well for culture change. Number 3, seek guidance for yourself. So I'm always looking for ways to get coaching or learn to improve my skill set. Number 4, develop emotional security. So if I'm working with a team, with a group, or leading as a manager or middle management, and I don't have an ability to maintain some emotional security myself, and I've experienced this with our team, where we do, for example, weekly calls. And sometimes it's really hard as a business owner to always stay positive and have my mind, especially with COVID, and stay in a really positive mindset and affect. Well, that has ramifications for the team. And I have to remember that I have a responsibility, that my attitude, my mindset sends a message. So you want to consider that as well for yourself. Number 5, acting with integrity. You know, it goes without saying, I'm not going to change cultures if my employees think that I'm acting out of integrity. I say one thing and do another. You might as well forget about it. Number 6, be well-versed in all systems, processes, and operations of the company. So again, if you look at yourself as a leader, as a role model, and yet you don't know how things work in your own organization, and yet you're telling your people to go out, hey, I want you to do this or work on this. You know, let's say you wanted your coworkers to focus on trauma-informed care in their intervention, but yet they all went through the training to learn how to apply trauma-informed care to their de-escalation, but you're the supervisor and you didn't. You skipped that class. We run into this quite a bit where we'll go into an organization and we'll deliver training to the workforce, but yet the managers or supervisors like, well, we're just going to put our people in your training, but you know, we don't need it ourselves. It's like, that's interesting. And then lastly, be open to feedback. Obviously, in leading yourself, part of leading yourself is recognizing that you don't always have all the answers and being open to feedback, constructive feedback and criticism from your team. So I'll take a break right there. Howie, Steve, I'd love to hear from you, your thoughts on this piece of leading yourself and how that comes into play.
Well, if I could, I'd start off just, you touched on being aware of the feelings of others. And so I think anytime, if we're looking at a culture change, we have to be aware that change can be difficult for everyone, especially if it's not their idea. So we have to approach it in a way, and it can be sales, and it's promoting why this change is going to benefit everyone. I know for myself, so the first 17 years of my professional career, I started in mental health, working in treatment centers as a ground floor staff, ultimately developing a group home that I ran for 5 years before coming on with CCG full time. CCG was really helped guide me in developing the curriculum for that program, for the group home. It was a new approach on how we interacted with clients and the standard we hold ourselves to. I had the good fortune of going through the Train the Trainer program, where we talk about trainers are leaders throughout, not just when we're facilitating a training, but that we're leading by example. And that goes right to the point you had shared. Are we asking our employees to do something we wouldn't do ourselves? And we can't. We have to be well-versed in every aspect of programming, whether I'm talking to the kitchen staff and the challenges that they're facing with COVID now and ordering food, or our transport drivers. Everyone has their own personal challenges that are going to be associated with this culture change. And as a leader, we need to be sympathetic to and help highlight how these changes will benefit them moving forward. So
Awesome.
I think it's huge.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. I'm going to move to the next one. And Howie, I'll catch you for the next one for the interest of time. Leading up. So leading up, we talk about performing your duties with positive energy and attitude. So one of the things to consider is if I'm not the boss, what is the energy and attitude that I'm pushing upward? What's happening to those that are looking at me, right, from a leadership position? And so performing my duties with positive energy, demonstrating respect for those who are above me at all times. So, coming from a Marine Corps background, I learned all about bearing. In the Marine Corps, when we were in the war in Iraq, there was stuff that they asked us to do that many of us struggled with. And they're like, look, don't argue. You follow orders, period, right? Or people die, right? And that was kind of the message. But it doesn't matter if you don't like how this is done. This is the way we've always done it, and this is how we're going to do it. And it was kind of like that old mentality. I know, Howie, you know this too. It translates into law enforcement. Well, that's just the way we've always done it. And there's not the change, right? Stop trying to be a ringleader. Just do what you're told. Well, there's an element here that if I am seeking to make change upwards, even if I don't like what's being asked of me, and pending that it's not unethical or immoral, I need to still demonstrate positive energy and attitude, because eventually if I succeed and do what's being asked and we get it done, there may be then the window to bring up a new, better way of doing it and demonstrating that respect to my superiors. So number 3, speak with directness and avoid being the yes man or yes woman, right? I've worked with individuals that they get promoted to middle management, and all of a sudden they forget all their loyalty to like the front line, right? And now all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, when you were down here with us, you knew that the bosses were crazy and were giving us all these, and you stood up for us. What happened? And so we need to recognize that as we're leading up, as we're moving up in an organization, especially, that we have to remember where we came from and figure out a way to pass those messages upward with respect and do it at the right time. So number 4, bring solutions, not just problems. I can tell you that working as, the CEO of CCG and in other jobs, there's nothing that kind of troubles you worse as a leader, as a supervisor, is when your people come to you with problems without also bringing a solution. It's beautiful when you are running, an organization or making decisions and your people bring you a problem, but they're like, hey, we're running into this issue, or, we're finding that the kids on the unit are constantly being upset about XYZ. Here's what we think would be a solution. That's fantastic. So leading up, not just looking at your leadership to have all the answers all the time. Also, doing your homework ahead of time and ask for what can't be completed yourself. So when we think about leading up, and again, developing a culture of change that where we make things better, do your homework ahead of time. If you can Google it and find the answer, don't bring it to your boss. Let your boss know, hey, this was a problem. We Googled it. We couldn't find the solution, or we couldn't amongst ourselves come up with a solution. So we're really hoping maybe you have a better option for us. And then lastly, in leading up, do more than what you're asked so that you receive more than you actually expect. Nothing better. If you want a promotion, if you want a bit more leadership in an organization, the best thing you can do is do more than what you were asked. Don't wait to be told. All right, Howie, what you got, buddy?
Yeah, well, I'll just bounce here real quick to something that I captured this morning I thought was kind of interesting due to the fact that we were talking about this topic. It says, big mistake. Many bosses have this attitude. Anyone is replaceable easily like gloves. They can hire someone even better. So keep treating employees poorly. They do a disservice to the company. A good employee has knowledge, system, products, and processes. They've built relationships with clients, coworkers, which takes years to build. When you lose a good employee, you lose a part of your culture, and you may lose your own future. Never push loyal employees to the point where they no longer care. And the headline on that was, people don't leave bad jobs. They leave because of bad bosses, poor management, and don't appreciate their value. So I think that's pretty trendy, like you were saying. in law enforcement. My experience that people get promoted off of the way that they take a test, and a numerical score predicts their leadership abilities, right? And so hitting on the first one, leading yourself, that responsibility is incumbent upon each person who's employed, from the leadership down to the newest hired member. Those things you should take upon yourself. And I think that is just if you're leading yourself, you are definitely going to be leading up, because those tasks that are required to lead up, they're easy to accomplish if you're leading yourself, because truly your boss at your job, they are your boss at your job. They don't control your whole life. So it really spins out into another spectrum. What is truly leading you in life, and those values should be carried on into your job. And hopefully you have something that is leading your life that has high values, the bar set high, and allows you to be a good employee. And I think, on feedback, that's one of the big ones, I think, for bosses, is to be open to feedback and not let pride and ego come into the situation and have their own ego bruised when an employee comes respectfully and with integrity to try to improve their position or something within the company. And I've seen it once again numerous times. Just because I got the stripes, I'm in charge. We're not doing that. And then my other big one is, and I encountered this numerous times in my career, and my best bosses were willing to at least hear me out if I had a solution and not just a complaint. Because and that's part of having your big boy pants on and going forth, doing the effort of investigating the problem and finding what kind of solutions are possible. They may not be able to, because if it's financially, they may not be able to accomplish that the solution you came up with. But at least it lets your higher ups know that you took time and effort to do that. And I think that is respect back. So I thought, based on the comment I saw this morning and talked about, and it's a trend, I think, where bosses don't value their employees and it's often threatened. I know in my former work in the police department, well, if you don't like it, you can go back to the street. That's their answer. That's very, very poor leadership.
Okay. All right. Awesome. I appreciate it. All right. Let's move to the next one. So we talked about leading yourself. We talked about leading upwards, but now we want to talk about leading across. So depending, again, on your role, and to tie this all back in, the more your organization's culture supports de-escalation or crisis resolution, not just outwardly with your consumers, but among your employees and coworkers, the better off you're going to be in your ability to de-escalate crisis situations that come up. So again, just kind of looking for the tie. If you're on here going, well, Brendan, you guys are talking about leadership, and how does this relate to de-escalation? It's very related, especially if you work in an organization. Now, I know some of you may be here and you're working as a LCSW or MSW, and you've got your own practice, and you're like, how does this tie in? And maybe you're just working in your own organization. It's just you in your own private practice. So you may have to find ways to bring this in, and maybe just the leadership of yourself is the key here. But for all of us that are working in an organization where there's more than just ourselves, we have to be a unified front. And if our culture is supportive of de-escalation and resolving crisis, and we're doing that and we're helping be a supportive environment, we're going to do a better job of de-escalation. So leading across, take initiative to meet coworkers where they are. Sometimes within an organization, especially the larger it is, when you are one of those front line or even in management, you will see cliques start to develop. And there will be groups of staff that either work in certain units or certain areas of the organization that start to either become very cohesive together, which is great, but sometimes they don't always work well with others, right? Like third shift doesn't get along with first shift, and second shift doesn't always get along with first shift, day shift, evening shift, weekend squad. And my goal is to recognize where these partnerships, if you will, are not working out. And how to identify, what role am I playing, and can I make sure that we meet each other where we are and we find more of the areas that we're similar versus that we are different. Just something when I worked in the hospital, we would often get caught up in the, look, I don't know how day shift does it, but evening shift, we run things our way. I don't know what y'all did over the weekend, but it's Monday through Friday, we're here. And you get into these conflicts, right? So this is where we have to take that initiative to meet coworkers where they are. Do the work that's required of you. So I can't just let my coworkers handle and carry the big weights, right? And carry all the heavy logs. I've got to do the work that's expected of me. Another piece here, keep silent until you're ready to offer something of value. I think this is really important. Too often when there's, maybe there's not necessarily effective leadership, everyone that is equals or people that are equals start to speak louder than others that were at the same level. And one person's voice gets heard quite a bit more than the others. And we have to be respectful of that fact and recognize, hey, if I'm not in a position of leadership, it doesn't mean I don't have a voice, but I want to make sure that I'm silent until I'm ready to offer something of value, not just maybe an opposing viewpoint. Connect with others around the needs of all. So I've been in groups where I've worked across the board and I've seen where there's been an imbalance of needs and values, and having respect to try and help out with the needs of all. Provide relevant solutions or be prepared to team up to defend the group. Sometimes I may be, as a coworker, be the only one that's willing to go to the boss to bring up an issue. And I have to take ownership of that. That if I have leadership capabilities and people look at me as a leader and maybe they're fearful, they don't feel ready to take an issue up the chain, look around, look to my left and right and say, hey, do we need a leader right now? Do we need somebody who's going to work for the better good of the group and bring it up to higher? Be ready to stand for justice, even if it doesn't always directly benefit myself. So maybe I'm in a position at work where I'm seeing that there are elements that my coworkers are not being fairly represented, but I'm already receiving the benefit of representation. But there's things that I can do to help with my coworkers receive that same, benefit. And so I have to be open and willing to do that. The last one here, connect with the spirit of service, avoids only self-serving motivation. So one of the keys, and I see we're running out of time, so we'll leave the last leading down for maybe the next webinar. But to wrap up here, and I think this one kind of ties in nicely, is that the more I can do to connect with the spirit of service within myself and being a person of service, the more I will benefit the organization and thereby carry forth the message of the organization versus only looking out, like when I go to work, what's in it for me today, right? But instead say, how can I make sure that the next steps that I take for the organization or even in this crisis are of benefit to all of us? If I'm leading myself, I'm making sure that I have integrity to what's important to me and what's in it for me in a crisis. And those of you who've been through our training where we talk about the 5 steps of de-escalation, and the first one being what's in it for me, when I consider leadership and culture change in an organization, it's more looking at the whole picture. And what can we do as an organization to present a message and a culture that is supportive of service and being of service. So as we're winding down now, we got a minute for each of you here. I would love to hear kind of a wrap up on how you think culture change and de-escalation tie in, and maybe some key takeaways before we finish this out today.
All right, I'll go real quick. It's passion, right? I don't think it matters if you're at the top, in the middle, or at the bottom, but if you're passionate, if you believe that you can bring that change, you're going to do it through role modeling. You're going to do it by promoting communication amongst everyone, taking in all those different viewpoints. We may get a different perspective that could help lead us there more quickly, but we have to be open to conversation. We have to take a team approach, but in doing so, we can be the individual that is the heart of that change. And passion passion shows through. That
Awesome. All right, Howie, take us home.
Yep, got 1 second. Now I'm over. Okay. True leadership starts from the top, and true leaders need to be humble, and they also have to realize they're under a microscope. If they truly want to be leaders, they are being viewed all the time. So if they are truly displaying true leadership, they will have the followers. People want to follow people that are trusted, humbled leaders trying to do the best for the organization and the best for their people. And all the true leaders I've been around and what I've read, true leaders want to develop leaders underneath them to take over at some point, not be satisfied with where they are. And that's the kingdom right there. And then when they leave, someone else has to start off. So that would be my message.
Awesome. And as we finish out here, that's such a great point. I know years ago, I think it was from John Maxwell, but he was saying a story he was telling where somebody said, well, I don't want to train my people because if I send them to all this training, they're going to get good and they're going to leave, right? And they're going to move on and go work for somebody else. And he said, well, okay, what's the alternative? You give them no training, they stay terrible, and they never leave. So it puts it in perspective. You're going to always do everything you can to empower those that work with you so that you're building the skill set of everyone. Awesome. Well, guys, I really appreciate you being here. And those of you on this webinar, I hope you got something out of this today. As Tracy mentioned over in the comments, you do get certificates of attendance for being in these webinars. So happy to give you those. As it says there, if you just email Tammy@crisisconsultantgroup.com, we'll get that out to you. Thank you all for being here, our loyal followers. And for those of you, again, if you came in halfway, you will receive automatically an email with the replay link that you can forward to anyone and everyone. We do these every week, new topics every week. So definitely appreciate you being here, and we'll see you hopefully next week. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.